Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fish Tank. I'm Bad as Fish 80 and today we've got some patch news for Minion Masters. This is going to be the second patch in the Invasion expansion. Now before we dive in, if I could just ask you to take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. Now, let's have a look at what we're going to be seeing in this patch. Now this is the Invasion expansion. It's going to be the second patch within that expansion. It's going to be version 1.32 on the Thursday the 3rd of February. We're going to have some new cards, a new legendary skin plus emote, some balance changes, and a load of bug fixes. Right, let's get diving in. First card. This is going to be Azog, Void Fiend of Shazrak. Let's find out about this chap. Now, so this is going to be a 4 mana Voidborn minion. 300 HP, so kind of between Elite Swarmer and Warrior HP. 25 DPS, so not particularly damaging, but it does have an ability. The ability is called Shadow Dash. Now this is an ability that will originally cost 1 mana, and then every time you use it, it's going to cost an additional mana. But what does it do? Well, the Shadow Dash causes the unit to nether step to a nearby position, damaging enemy units in the area. So it's going to do 100 damage, 50 damage to face. And as mentioned, with this ability card and with a lot of the other ability cards, every time you play it, it will be replaced by a version that costs 1 mana more in your hand. So the more you use it, the more it's going to cost. So this is similar to the Crystalline Sweep that we've seen a lot from the Veil Stalker, but instead of something that's being activated by spells, this is something you can activate manually. Okay, so that's the first new card, Azog, Void Fiend of Shazrak. The second new card, this is called the Impetus Blast. Now, the Impetus Blast is a 2 mana Outlander spell. This will push all enemies in the area away and deal a small amount of damage. Now, it's going to do 25 damage, so not very much, but decent for dealing with hordes. And it's going to have a range of 4.5. So just a small Outlander spell there. So those are the 2 new cards that we've got dropping in this expansion. Now, as mentioned, we have a new skin. This is going to be the Green Duchess Diona skin. It's a legendary skin, and I think that looks fairly pog. Diona, one of my favourite masters for sure. And, as mentioned earlier, we're going to have a new emote as well. Valentine's Day is this month, and we're going to have a beautiful Void Friend Azog. Lovely little heart there. Right, so we got 2 new cards, a new skin and a new emote. Let's dive into the balance changes. Now, there's been some stuff on the ladder recently that people have felt have been very unbalanced, myself included. So let's see how they are being addressed. So we're going to look at the buffs, and then we're going to look at the nerfs. Now, the first buff is a master buff. Now, this is a buff to Mordar. Remember, Mordar recently got changed where perk 2 and perk 3 were switched round. That was really detrimental to his overall power. Plus, there was a bug where the perk 2 didn't work until perk 3. But now, stuns no longer reset the timer. What that means is when you stun a tombstone, whilst the tombstone is stunned, you can no longer res from it. But once the stun ends, the timer hasn't been reset, so it doesn't have to recharge. So that means that it's going to be more difficult to deny reses. And it's going to mean that instead of your opponent just shock rocking it sort of ad hoc, they're going to need to stun it at an appropriate time. So that's a big buff, I think, for Mordar there. Stuns no longer reset the timer, but you can't res while stunned. And the activation delay, though, this is a little bit of a nerf on the other side of it. It's going to take 15 seconds for it to activate. So it's going to take 15 seconds before it's charged and in a position where it can res a unit. So we've got some changes there to Mordar, and as we'll see in the bug fixes a bit later on, the bugs with Mordar have been quashed. Now, another small buff for a master is Stormbringer. Stormbringer's having added death prediction. So that means that when a unit's about to die, something else that's attacking it can tell it's going to die and then doesn't need to therefore attack it. So that means Stormbringer's going to no longer attack things that are about to die and will instead attack something more beneficial. So that's a small buff for Stormbringer. Now we get into some unit buffs. Right, we've got a Demon Warrior buff, small attack speed increase. We've got a Spawn of Fury buff. Now, Spawn of Fury, remember, splits a unit in half, but it gives you 2 slightly smaller copies. They were previously having 33% max health, sorry, 33% reduction of max health and God, I can't say that, max damage. That's going to go down to 25% reduction. So if my maths are correct, you should, if you use it on a Colossus, for example, which has 1000 HP, something we see quite a lot, instead of getting 2 660 HP units, you will get 2 750 HP units, and they will do slightly more damage than they would have done before this buff. So that's a nice little buff to the Spawn of Fury spell. Crystal Construct, we're going to see here, gets a health buff from 800 to 850. The same with the Guardian, again 800 to 850, so just making those units a little more tanky. And then we see the Spirit Infusion. Remember, this shoots out some spirits, and when you get a Cursed Ascension, it used to give you an additional spirit, now it will give you an additional 2 spirits. Gorek's Gate is next. Mana cost has been reduced from 4 to 3. But the offshoot of that is that you cannot wildcard it. So remember, in solos there are no wildcards, so this doesn't affect that. But in pre-mades you can wildcard, but not Gorek's Gate. You can only have one of them. So that's a nice buff, but no wildcards. Mana Puff Madness is next. So the mana cost is going down from 3 to 1, but it's getting an additional 2 mana freeze. So a unit that costs 3 mana compared to a unit that costs 1 mana that has 2 mana freeze, they both effectively cost 3 mana. But the difference is you can spawn the one with the mana freeze earlier, because you only need 1 mana to spawn it. So a slight buff for Mana Puff Madness, just so you can spawn it a little earlier and try to get some benefit from it. Now the next buff we're seeing is with Mountain Shaper. Now, remember, Mountain Shaper, you can charge it up while it's in your hand, up to a maximum of 5 charges. So whilst the damage is going up from 100 to 125, overall the max damage is going up from 500 to 625. Mountain Shaper is not a card we see too often in solos, but in duos it is very strong, especially in late game when there's a lot of stuff all over the field. Mountain Shaper can be incredibly powerful, and now potentially more powerful. Now we see a little buff for the Bridge Shrine. So the health is going up from 400 to 500. So remember, the Bridge Shrine gives you an extra experience every time you get experience from the bridge that it is closest to. Now we see a change to one of the more recent cards, the Sapphire Pebble. So this is getting a number of changes. So hold on, let's go through them. So Myriad is being reduced from 2 to 1. So remember, Myriad is when you draw the card, if it has a Myriad effect, that means it puts an X number of copies in your deck. Used to have 2, now it's 1. So when you draw it, you get 1 additional copy. The damage has been, as we saw previously, the damage was nerfed. It's now been increased. It's going up from 40 to 50. And as we spoke about in the previous patch notes, the 40 to 50, or 50 to 40 as it was previously, is very important, because under 50 damage it can't single shot the little skeletons anymore, which is really problematic for it, especially when accursed decks are everywhere. So it can now, with the buff, single shot skeletons. And the offshoot of having a reduced number of Myriad copies is that they've decided that you can now wildcard it, so you can have up to 2 copies in pre-mades and randoms. So that's the first card we have that has both Myriad and the ability to wildcard it. It'd be interesting to see how that works out. Right, next we have a buff to Bats. Just a simple mana cost buff, going down from 5 to 4. Now, of course, the cost of a spell like this is very important, because you use it, and then for a certain period of time you generate a bat every time you use a mana. So if the spell costs less, that means that you have more mana to generate bats from it. So it'd be interesting to see if we see more of those. Next we have Shield Captain Avea. So this is quite a substantial health increase from 350 to 450. Remember, Shield Captain Avea is the unit with the quest where she has to shield friendly units 4 times, and then she will get her quest complete and get the extra Legionnaires. So the extra health is going to firstly help her trade better when she's on her own, but also the fact that she's going to have more health means she's going to have more longevity, and therefore give you a better chance of getting these shield activations and getting her quest completed as quickly as possible. So I think that's a really nice change for Shield Captain Avea. Next we see a buff. It's kind of a buff and a nerf to Zap Shrine. Mana cost is going down from 4 to 3, so that's a buff, but the range is being reduced from 25 to 20, so that's a nerf. And I think the change of the range is to stop it firstly from stunning masters, and I'm not entirely sure whether it will stop it from stunning tombstones or not, because remember, if you use the Zap Shrine with the Zenshi flow effect, that means you've used the Zenshi card before it. When you spawn it, it stuns effectively everything, which can be incredibly overpowering. Stuns your opponent's defense, their master, their tombstones, everything. So it's not going to be able to do that quite so effectively anymore. Next we have a buff for the Gambler's Ball. So remember, the Gambler's Ball will give you either a healing fireball or just a regular fireball, but you can activate the sacrifice effect where you get 2 activations, 2 of the spells. Now previously you had to sacrifice 3 Slitherbounds, that's been reduced to just 2 Slitherbounds, so it should be easier to get that off. And remember, if you activate it and it casts a spell twice, it could give you 2 healing balls, could give you 2 fireballs, could give you 1 of each. So we'll see if that gets any more play. Another buff coming up here for the Incubus, little damage increase from 60 to 65. And that is the end of the buffs. Now we'll look at the nerfs. Now the nerfs are probably the things that people are more interested in seeing. But let's dive in and have a look what we've got. So the first nerf is to a master, Volko. Burn the Bridges is becoming Burn the Bridge. That's right, instead of burning both bridges from your perk 1, you can only burn 1. And you can choose which one to burn based on where you use the spell. The closest bridge to the spell will burn. Now I think that's a big nerf for Volko. The Burn the Bridges is very, very strong. Does 200 damage to everything that's on both bridges previously, now only on 1 bridge. Now Volko was mostly seen as a very, very strong master in pre-mades, and that's partially because of the fact that firstly his bridge burn will be able to get more value because there's going to be more stuff all over the bridges in pre-mades or randoms. And additionally, the fact that his perk can also buff units of his teammate as well. So Volko was very strong, not going to be quite so strong anymore. This is a nerf you're going to feel more in duos, for sure. Right, now, another nerf coming up. I know there's going to be one guy that's going to be very disappointed to see this. Scotty the Sensitive Savage, damage going down from 65 to 60. That's a 93 to 86 DPS drop. So that's a substantial drop for Scotty. And of course, if you're using him in a Volko deck with Rage and Berserker Rage, then these reductions in damage are going to be felt even more. Now, Scrapyard. Scrapyard has been kind of problematic. It's had a bug where if you could stun it, it basically destroyed it completely. And when we look at the bug fixes momentarily, you'll see that that's now been fixed. But also, if it didn't get stunned, it felt it was too strong. So it's received a nerf. You no longer get the extra 60 base tech. So remember, when you spawn it, it consumes all your tech, and then it will give you that tech back over a period of time. Previously, it gave you 1.5 times the consumed tech plus an additional 60. That additional 60 has been removed. So it will give you 1.5 times the consumed tech over 25 seconds, and every time you get to 100 tech, it will summon a random 3 to 5 mana Outlander card. So that should be hopefully bringing the Scrapyard into a better spot, but we shall watch this space. Spawner buildings always have a potential to be difficult to balance because they can get very little value or incredible value depending on the counters available. Now we have a look at a nerf to one of the most popular spells recently, Harmful Souls. Now the developers have, instead of decreasing the potential effectiveness of the spell, they've changed it to make it more counterable. So one of the things that Harmful Souls was very strong is the fact that it was so quick, it was really difficult to react to. So they've made some changes. It's going to take an extra half a second to start, and there's going to be an extra 0.1 of a second between each soul. So now, hopefully, if you're prepared, you can react quickly to it. So for example, if you put a heavy unit down and then, oh god, it's going to get Harmful Souled, throw down some scrats, throw down some little skeletons, anything to soak these souls. So be interesting to see now if people can start to play around Harmful Souls, because this was a card that was incredibly strong, not only in cursed decks but in all sorts of decks. It was pretty much the removal, heavy removal spell of choice. So we'll see now if this will limit the effectiveness of it somewhat. Right, now, Dragon's Nest. Dragon's Nest has been everywhere, especially on the solo ladder. Now, developers have decided to nerf this. They've reduced the lifetime of it from 35 seconds to 30 seconds. So remember, the Dragon's Nest will be spitting out whelps and dragon whelps, flying dragon whelps, depending on the spell usage. Now, the fact it's going to last shorter means that you'll have less overall mana to get overall value from it. So you'll still be able to get that high output, quick value at the start of it, but it won't last quite so long. So we'll see if this brings the Dragon's Nest in line. Now remember, when you're coming to the balancing of things, you've got to be careful. You don't want to go from a position where something is far too strong and then far too weak. You're hopefully trying to find something that reduces the effectiveness of it, but still allows it to be a strategy that people can benefit from. So we'll see if this brings it more in line with other decks. Now, another nerf to one of the new cards, Siege Imperator Ruby. Now, this has been a card that's very strong, and I'm surprised not to see some kind of nerf to the plasma cannon ability, but that's not what the devs have decided to do. They've reduced Siege Imperator Ruby's ability to hit flying units. So I think that's quite important, because if you put flying units over the top of Ruby, if she can no longer hit them, she can no longer use her plasma blast on them either, because remember, she's got a little area that she can't target on herself. So hopefully this will give you some additional tools when it comes to trying to remove Siege Imperator Ruby. So for example, if you've got a flying prop horde, something like that, these can now sit above her and actually get some value. So that's a good change, I think. Is it enough? We'll find out. Right, so these are the balance changes that we've seen, a bunch of buffs, a bunch of nerfs. Now we're going to look at the bug fixes. Now, in the last patch, there were very, very few, if any, bug fixes. But this patch, there are a lot of bug fixes, and that's great to see. So let's dive in and see which are the most important ones. So the limit of Big Dwarf Pack redemptions has been increased. So if you've been around for a long time, if you've won a lot of giveaways, you may be in a position where you're unable to redeem any more Big Dwarf Packs. That's now been fixed. So if you're in that situation, you can now redeem Big Dwarf Packs. I'm not sure what the limit was, 100, something like that. It was a lot. So it didn't affect too many people, but the longer this game goes on, the more people are going to hit that limit. So that's good to see that being fixed. Twitch account linking has been fixed. So there was an issue where if you were relatively new, a new streamer, and you linked your Twitch, you wouldn't get the puffs in the game. So hopefully this will now fix that. So if you're a new streamer and you had any issues with that, hopefully after Thursday, check it out. If you get puffs, let us know in the comments that it's been fixed. Now, we alluded to this earlier, stun no longer resets the scrapyard. So previously there was a bug where if the scrapyard got stunned, it completely reset the scrap and it made it effectively useless. That's now been fixed. Again, we mentioned this earlier, Mordor perk 2 was kind of broken. You didn't get a perk 2 until you got perk 3, which was the hasted reses. Now that's been fixed. Also, the tombstone visuals have been fixed. That means if the tombstone gets stunned, you should still be able to see the charge on the tombstone, whereas before it was bugged and you couldn't tell. Scrat tunnels, this was something that got broken in the last patch. It's been fixed now, so if you're a Scrat tunnel user, hopefully you shouldn't have any problems. There's a fix with the death prediction in the bear. I've got no idea what that means. Additionally, with Armour of Light and Sagalite Shield. Means nothing to me, but if these were things you were struggling with, they've now been fixed. There was a bug where Ting Tang Tongue didn't stop attacking when stunned. Now they do. The /sync achievements command has been fixed, so if you're struggling with syncing your achievements between the game and Steam, try the command after the patch. Hopefully stuff has been fixed. Valorian's Searing Light will now use the correct skin. Now a couple of performance ones here. Shield Captain Avea used to be a big FPS drop when her quest was completed. That's now been fixed. And previously Chain, I've written here Chain. I've only just noticed that mistake, but it's actually Chain Gang. Chain Gang FPS drop has been fixed as well. And finally, the game is now running on a new version of the Unity engine, so hopefully that should bring some performance improvements and also allow for additional performance improvements in the future. Right, so that's patch 1.32. 2 new cards, a new skin, a new emote, a bunch of balance changes, a bunch of bug fixes. Hopefully this is going to be a great patch. Please take a moment if you can to subscribe and like the channel and the content if you're enjoying it. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments. Let me know what you think about them. I'll be streaming, of course, on Thursday to see what the new season brings. But that is it for me here. I'm Bad as Fish 80. This is the Fish Tank, and I'll see you soon. Take care.